President Trump refused to answer questions Monday about reporting by the New York Times that he avoided paying any federal income tax for several years. The paper says it obtained over 20 years of financial documents. They reportedly show the president paid only $750 in income tax in 2016 and 2017, and that he lowered his tax liability through a series of loopholes in the U.S. tax code, write-offs, and business losses. Those documents also reportedly show Mr. Trump's businesses are losing money and that he owes more than $400 million on loans made to his various companies. CBS News has yet to independently obtain the returns cited by the Times. The president has called the reports about his finances, quote, fake news, and later accused the New York Times of illegally obtaining his personal information. With just 36 days until the election, it remains to be seen how these new revelations about the president's finances will impact the race for the White House, or how they will factor into the first presidential debate set for Tuesday night. Ben Tracy is at the White House with the latest.
Tonight, President Trump is not answering questions about tax records he's long tried to conceal. In a bombshell report, the New York Times obtained tax return data covering more than 2 decades. It shows President Trump paid just $750 in federal income tax in 2016 and 2017, the same amount a single adult making about $18,000 would owe. And in 10 of the 15 years before that, he paid nothing because his businesses lost so much money. The Biden campaign turned the tax revelations into an ad showing what average Americans pay. The Times report contradicts Mr. Trump's billionaire business guru image.
They paid me $213 million.
Many of his businesses, including golf courses and hotels, report losing large amounts of money. The president also used tax deductions to fund his lavish lifestyle, writing off expenses for housing, aircraft,
You're fired,
and even $70,000 in hairstyling for his TV appearances.
It's totally fake news, made up, fake.
On Sunday, the president denied the report. Today, he defended his use of depreciation and tax credits in a pair of tweets. Mr. Trump has long claimed there's nothing to hide in his tax returns while refusing to release them.
I look forward to releasing that. I look forward to releasing many things. I'm going to release many things, and people will be really shocked.
The documents obtained by the Times show the IRS is auditing a questionable $73 million tax refund the president claimed and could now be forced to pay back with interest. The records also show Mr. Trump took in $73 million from foreign deals during his first 2 years in office and is now facing hundreds of millions of dollars in loans coming due.
This president appears to have over $400 million in debt, 420, whatever it is, million dollars in debt. To whom? Different countries? What is the leverage they have? So for me, this is a national security question.
Ben Tracy and Ed O'Keefe join me now. Ben is a CBS News White House correspondent, and Ed is a CBS News political correspondent. Welcome to you both. Ben, let's start with you and the president's taxes. What are some of the legal concerns right now, and how is this playing politically so far?
Well, we should start by saying that we don't know if the president or his accountants have done anything illegal here. You would need an audit of these tax documents that the New York Times has to know if there really is any illegality or anything out of the ordinary. But certainly it raises a lot of questions about the amount of money that the president was writing off as business expenses, everything from housing and aircraft to his hairstyling to the tune of about $70,000. And then also just did his businesses lose the amount of money that the president says they lost, which is largely what allowed him to have little to no tax liability. In terms of the politics of this, you did hear Speaker Pelosi come out today and say that she thinks this is actually a national security issue because if the president owes somewhere in the neighborhood of $420 million to banks and other entities, she thinks that's a problem, that those banks, if there's foreign countries involved, that they could have leverage over the president. So certainly you're probably going to hear more of that from Democrats as the days go on.
Well, Ed, you're in Cleveland at the site of Tuesday's first presidential debate between President Trump and Joe Biden. How might we see this issue about the president's taxes play out?
Oh, well, like Ben said, you're going to hear Democrats talking about it, none other than Joe Biden, who is likely going to find a way to bring it up at least once or twice over the course of the 90-minute debate tomorrow night. His campaign is already selling merchandise on their website that features T-shirts and campaign buttons that say, "I paid more in income taxes than Donald Trump." Here in the debate hall tomorrow night, Biden's likely to argue that the president was a tax cheat at the time when many Americans were playing by the rules and paying far more than he did in taxes. And the other thing he's likely to do is play up his working class roots. He's from Scranton, Pennsylvania. He's been talking lately about the contrast between Scranton, Pennsylvania and Park Avenue. Donald Trump didn't grow up on Park Avenue. He grew up in Queens. But the idea being that he had a more comfortable New York upbringing, one that is far different than that enjoyed by most Americans. The issue for Biden will be trying to keep focused on all of that when the president's going to be trying to knock him off of his game and make other arguments and other attacks, potentially on Hunter Biden and the work that he did in China and Ukraine that was the subject of a recent congressional investigation, or by raising questions about his mental fitness. But noun, verb, Donald Trump taxes, noun, verb, coronavirus, that's likely to be the song sheet that Joe Biden is singing from tomorrow night.
Interesting. Well, Ed, President Trump is dismissing these most recent reports about his finances and says similar reports were brought up during the 2016 election cycle. Help us fact check that.
No, he's not wrong. We didn't have 20 years of his taxes, as the New York Times now does. We had more limited tax returns, but he's got a point. The nation has known in one way or another that this is somebody who has complex tax returns, who probably wasn't paying everything he's worth, has millions of dollars in debt, and the campaign argues that's not a big deal. Americans know this. They argue that this is an unfair, orchestrated, and well-timed attack on the president on the eve of this next debate. One of his aides earlier today told us here in Cleveland, look, the last New York Times reporter, the first one on all of this, came right around the time of the first debate. They're used to this. They've seen it before. Also raising questions as to why the Times is refusing to let the Trump operation see the records that they have to verify whether they are in fact the president's returns. The Times says they're not going to publish them because to do so might reveal their sources. But, they're doing what they usually do in these instances, point out that it's not that big a deal because it's already been known, and attacking the news outlet that reported the information.
Meanwhile, Ben, the president addressed the coronavirus pandemic at the White House Monday. He said vaccines are coming and the country is, quote, rounding the corner. But Vice President Pence said cases will rise in the days ahead, and Dr. Anthony Fauci said the U.S. is not in a good place. How do the president's comments square with what members of the White House task force are saying, as well as what's actually happening across the country?
Yeah, well, they don't square with what other task force members are saying. They also just don't square with reality. There really is no evidence to support what the president is saying, that we're rounding some sort of corner. We are seeing cases rise in nearly 30 states in the country right now. We're also heading into the colder weather season, into the flu season. So you've heard people like Dr. Fauci say that this could get rough here going into the fall and the winter before we have a vaccine. The president likes to focus on what he views as the good news. He wants to say that a vaccine is coming, that it might come before Election Day, and that we're somehow rounding a corner. But those things just aren't true. The experts say that a vaccine, even if they do find one in the next couple of months, the average American probably wouldn't be getting it until like the middle of next year. So the promises the president is making just aren't squaring with what we're seeing on the ground in the country.
Well, Ed, as you've reported, the Biden campaign has focused much of its attention on the Trump administration's response to the pandemic. What might we hear from the former vice president about this on Tuesday?
Well, he'll focus not only on the president, what their perceived mishandling of how the president has dealt with the pandemic, but also the economic downturn it's created. And that's in part why this reporting on the president's tax returns really add fuel to that argument that Biden has been trying to make. Their whole MO really has been, since the beginning of all this, that they are the anti-Trump, that they are well aware that calling out the president for how all of this has gone is the best case that they can make, and one that has successfully kept them on top in polling nationally and in key battleground states. So maybe there'll be some new zingers, maybe he's got some new succinct argument for it, but Biden really won't come in here to Cleveland doing anything terribly different than what he's been doing over the course of the last several months. I think, for me, the question, having watched him over the last several weeks, is how does he potentially respond to what the president throws at him? with humor? Does he do it with anger? Does he do it by sort of playing whataboutism with him? Or is there something else potentially? Or does he just sort of ignore it and pivot back? Because one aide told us today, look, if the president wants to come here to Cleveland and focus on Hunter Biden and the work that he did when his father was vice president, instead of focusing on the hundreds of thousands of people who've died, the millions who are unemployed by the mess that was created by the president, well, so be it. Americans will be able to see right through that. The Trump campaign, however, turns around and says, no, raising questions about things like Hunter Biden's work overseas, speak to the judgment that Joe Biden might have if he's commander-in-chief, if he was allowing his son to go out and enrich himself in ways that clearly, benefited from the family name. Remember, nothing was found that Hunter Biden did that was improper or illegal. Might just not sit well with people who don't like the thought of nepotism. But we'll see. I mean, 90 minutes, two guys in their 70s. They have not come face-to-face like this before. The stage is set. Should be a pretty interesting exchange.
Absolutely. Finally, with all of that in mind, I have the same question essentially for both of you. Ben, let me start with you. What is the White House saying about how President Trump is preparing for this first debate?
Well, the official line from the campaign is that the president is preparing for the debate by simply being president. And they also say that he's regularly taking questions from the hostile media and that that's also part of his preparation. But we do know that behind the scenes, the president has been preparing, not the typical preparation you might think a candidate would go through, where you have somebody playing your opponent and you're kind of at this mock debate stage. They say that the president on Air Force One on his recent trips, they've been using flashcards to go over content with him. They've shown him videos of some of Joe Biden's debate performances. And then we also know from the president himself yesterday here at the White House, when he did his briefing, he brought Rudy Giuliani and Chris Christie into the room. And I don't remember if somebody asked why they were there, but the president offered up that they were helping him with debate prep and that periodically one of them does stand in for Joe Biden. So there's a mix of traditional and atypical debate prep going on here at the White House with President Trump.
Interesting. And Ed, what do we know about Joe Biden's debate prep?
He has been off the trail for the last 5 days, since Thursday, essentially, preparing for this, based at his home in Wilmington, doing some in-person, mostly virtual meetings with aides. We know that the campaign's top attorney, Bob Bauer, the former White House counsel, who is the husband of Anita Dunn, a senior aide to Biden, has been playing the role of the president in these exchanges. He's not dressing up like him, we believe, but he's sort of playing that role of the one lobbing attacks at Biden that they might anticipate. Aides also tell us that they're monitoring the president's Twitter feed, who doesn't, to try to keep an eye on what potential stream of consciousness thought the president might have at this moment and might use against him. That's where they're getting the idea that perhaps the president might go after Hunter Biden. Of course, the president has also said that over the last few days, that he thinks it's fair game. But beyond that, the Biden campaign won't say much. The fact that he was, however, mostly out of the public eye over the last 6 days, is a sign that they really are trying to keep Biden focused on what is expected to draw 100 million people across various screens in this country. Expected to be a very big television night.
Yes, it'll be fascinating to watch. Ben Tracy and Ed O'Keefe, thank you both.